Now I celebrate it. I celebrate the fact that we actually get to attract people who want to be part of that ministry with us.
Mm-hmm.
And what a blessing. And it's so cool because when we hire people, and you guys know this, when they're all in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
They're so excited to be a part of it. And so that taking that concept and throwing it out there with the fishing pole has really been helpful.
Peace and blessings, and welcome to another episode of DiscipleSHIFT, where we have conversations to help inspire parish leadership that makes disciples. Now, we like to say at DiscipleSHIFT, whether you're coming back or you're new to the show, that we're not experts in church. There's no such thing as experts in church, but we are experts in God's mercy. We're experts in the fact that God can do extraordinary things with ordinary people and circumstances. And so we're here just to share a little bit about who we are, what we're learning as we're doing ministry, with the hopes that it can bless you or someone you know in the ministry that you've been entrusted with. On today's episode, I feel like I'm going to the principal's office or the dean's office, more appropriately. We're talking about HR, specifically HR within the church, and how that in and of itself is a ministry. And so joining us on the podcast, you might recognize her, Kris Ziegelhofer and Kelly Venegas.
Hi.
So welcome to the show. Kris, can we start with you? Maybe just a brief intro.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Khalil, Kris Ziegelhofer. I'm the Human Resources Coordinator here at St. John the Evangelist, and I also handle parishioner engagement as well. But as far as human resources, it's kind of the whole gamut: hiring, sometimes firing, payroll, benefits, kind of the whole 9 yards with that, and then handle also some things, a lot of the same type of thing with onboarding new parishioners and a lot of special projects and things of that sort.
Great. Hi, I'm Kelly Venegas, and I've been entrusted with human resources at the Diocese of Gary. I also work very closely and I'm responsible for safe environment for the diocese. And I was sharing with your team that I will have been there 17 years this May.
Wow.
So
Wow,
very
that's
exciting.
awesome.
You've seen a lot of development and
I've
just
seen
changes
a lot
and
of
growth. And,
Yes.
Wow, I didn't realize it was 17 years.
Mhm.
And were you always in HR? Did you?
Always been in HR. Yes.
Really?
So
Okay.
I was the the person that they hired after the finance council, the auditors from the financial council for the diocese told the bishop at the time, Bishop Melchek, you need human resources, and he had no idea what that was. And so, with the help of many, I was led there and said yes.
So this is, again, casual conversation.
Yeah.
I know we were going to go with a question to Kris, but I'm just fascinated by this. So the diocese didn't have HR prior to you coming on board?
They did not. They had They had a benefits coordinator who handled solely benefits, but there was no one doing human resources.
Wow. And how big was the personnel list at the time?
Great question. In the pastoral center or diocesan-wide might be hard for me to pinpoint, but in the pastoral center, it's always run about 35 to 40 people.
And there was no HR at the time.
Yeah, because you're talking how many parishes, even present day, I mean,
correct.
how many?
We
Like
have 60,
right.
60 parishes.
Right, and schools. So, I
20
mean,
schools.
that's a
Wow,
tremendous
that's a
amount of people
lot.
not to have had anybody in human resources to give guidance to priests and who are not typically trained in HR. It's typically not part of the seminaries. So.
Right.
Yeah, that was the thing. So I was blessed enough to have discerned in seminary. A lot of the things that I find myself dealing with day to day or assisting Father Mileta or our leadership team with, you don't really get exposure to while you're in the seminary. And so something like HR, it might be surprising to somebody who is coming from a corporate background to say, you're basically running a medium to small size business at the time, and there's nobody to do HR. It's kind of shocking. But then for church, it's like, okay, we're always trying to get better and do things better.
Yes.
So maybe on the one hand, I shouldn't be as surprised that there wasn't somebody in place.
And most parishes don't have somebody doing human resources like
you.
I do.
Yeah.
And even I like being able to bounce things off Kelly, even with having knowledge. I mean, there's
And
still,
likewise.
Yeah. So I can't imagine if you have no background in it and you're
Right.
trying to deal with an employee situation or even just hiring someone. How do I go about getting people in the door to apply? And, you know, I don't know how some parishes do it. It's got to be really hard.
Yeah.
So what was your background, Kris?
I worked in Welsh Incorporated. They had convenience stores and gas stations throughout Indiana, Michigan, and Virginia. So I started with them, and I worked in human resources, training and development, and then worked for another small business when I kind of part-time when they closed, but then decided to stay home with my children.
Okay.
And then started back off here part-time, and then gradually have just taken on more and more responsibilities, even over and above HR since being here.
So you're coming from an HR background,
Right.
corporate world. Is being at St. John the Evangelist your first ministry
Right. Yes.
experience of
Yes.
HR? Okay.
Mhm.
How would you define is there a distinction between the two?
Well, the pay
Similarities?
is definitely better in the church.
Yeah, you came for the money, right?
Yeah, I think for the money.
I always say the benefits are out of this world.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
No, but I always tell people I don't know that I could actually do corporate HR today for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's just a lot of things that I think would go against our faith now that you're forced to promote even in HR, which I think would be really hard to do. That was not really the case even back when, I started out at HR. It's just really devolved, I think, in the last maybe 10 to 15 years. But so that would be one reason. Another is just the fact that everything kind of has to be so black and white in corporate HR. And I feel like we can be a little bit more gray because of the pastoral care that we want to give to our employees and that our pastors want to also give. So I feel that, we can kind of have a little bit more of a gray area and still being consistent, but in also being able to treat people with compassion. And as you and I talk about, sometimes really being able to coach people, not just saying, oh, they're not doing their job, they need to go, but how do we coach them? How do we bring them along? Like, I think there's more of a willingness and openness to do that when you're in a church environment than you would be in a corporate environment. And then just being able to talk about things like pray together. We prayed together at the beginning of this podcast. We pray together before meetings. We talk about faith. Like, those would be things we would not be able to do in a corporate workplace. It just could get in trouble literally for doing that kind of thing. So it's just so freeing to be able to be in a job where you're actually able to live your faith and do your, use your skill set.
Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. 100%. I'm over here nodding my head. Yes, everything that
you actually did kind of take a little, so you were going to go in a different direction.
I did think about going back into the real world is what I call it, because it is so drastically different than doing HR in our Catholic, within the context of our Catholic faith. And very quickly learned that this is not where it's at. This is not, it's very constrictive. It was very challenging. And as Kris said, the corporate world is pushing an agenda. There are things that are absolutely antithetical to who we are and what we believe. And so to have to put that and put them in different juxtapositions is very uncomfortable and not fun. So I love the fact that we get to live our faith and we get to do our ministry within the context of our faith. What a blessing. What a blessing.
For sure.
What would you say so if there's a pastor or a parish administrator who doesn't have someone in the HR role, how would you encourage them to find somebody out? I mean, some parishes can afford to bring someone on staff, but some can't. I guess maybe just starting there, do they want to onboard? Are there resources available to them?
I could tell a little my own story that might be helpful to some parishioners. As I said, I stayed home with my children, and I didn't really, even when they got into school, I didn't want to work full time, having to get home later, miss all their events, not being able to help out at school or, sporting events, things like that. So I just kind of happened upon, got to know Father Milletta. They were doing a handbook committee, and he asked if I'd be on it as a volunteer. And for that, I just started off eventually working like 10 hours a week, which was perfect for me. As a mom, I was able to still do a little bit in my field, but still be very present for my children. And so I always tell people, look at the people in your parish, and especially if you have a school, there may be a lot of moms there with skills, maybe not even just HR, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's, some other field, but that might just want a few hours, and you're not talking about paying a lot of money. They just want, to kind of keep still their skills active, but they're not looking for tons of hours and a big paycheck, so there's those opportunities I think that maybe we don't explore enough.
And I would just agree with you wholeheartedly. We have people in our parishes and in the pews that have so many skills, talents, and abilities, and they're just wanting to give back in some way or another. So I think the more open we are and inviting to requesting and looking for those skills, like Father Mileto is with you, it's perfect. Yeah.
Retirees, people who have maybe retired that wouldn't mind doing a 10-hour gig as, the HR person for the parish or coming in to help with hiring or whatever it might be.
Yes.
Was it safe to say now that all dioceses have HR offices in place?
Yes. I'm part of a national group, so it's called the National Association of Church Personnel Administrators, which personnel is really a term that was used back in the 80s. A little bit of a dated, just a little dated, but nonetheless.
What are they saying now?
We're HR, just human resources.
They haven't caught up yet.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
It'll probably change. They'll get HR and it'll change to something else, like people management or something.
Exactly.
So then if every diocese has someone in your position in HR, maybe if Father can't find someone in the parish, he can always turn to that person for the support that they're looking for. Okay.
Absolutely. And that's a service. We are very focused outwardly. So how can we assist, Father? How can we assist parishes? How can we assist you all who are at the front lines getting and making disciples, right? So how can we best support you in the parishes and the pastors so that you can do what you need to do, to bring people into God's kingdom? So it's a beautiful thing. It's a blessing to be able to offer that support. And often, I would say for the first year that I was at the diocese, I don't think anyone really understood what HR was. So I'll share the story.
Please.
I was at a priest council meeting one time, which is a meeting of priests that help discern different ideas and what have you. And at the end of the meeting, during the meeting, I presented to them, introduced myself, what have you. And at the end of the meeting, one of the senior priests stood up and he said, "Oh, I get it. You're not from H&R Block."
Please tell me he was joking.
You were the tax lady.
It was so silly.
Oh,
it was really
bless
silly.
him.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
So we know, try to find someone in your parish. There's resources available at a diocesan level. Hopefully there's good relationships and connection there where you're able to get the help and the assistance that you need.
Yes.
What are you finding are some of the areas of need that most pastors or parishes need help with?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I would say the more involved we get with benefits, I think benefits become more and more involved, not only from a monetary paying for them, they're very expensive, but then also utilization and kind of getting through our plan and understanding problems. So we do a great big push in that area. I would also say recruiting, right? I mean, it's so hard. It's a challenge since COVID to get people in. I think what COVID did was it encouraged people to get part of the gig economy and kind of have a couple different things on the hopper. And, I'm going to do this job, and this job. I'm going to piece together, and I'm my own boss. And so that idea definitely takes you away from traditional. So we have to think outside of the box. We have to think of doing things new ways. We have to invite people to come in ministry, whatever feels comfortable with them. I really enjoyed speaking with some of your employees earlier who talked about, it was a friend who just asked, "Hey, would you come to Mass and listen to our music and check out, our sound? I know you have this background and you have this experience." And so really allowing the Holy Spirit to bring people to us is the beginning and ending of every one of my recruitment efforts. Lord, Holy Spirit, please send who you want to be here at this time. And I trust in it wholeheartedly. And oftentimes people will say, "Oh, Kelly, thank you so much. It was such a great hire." I will never, ever take credit. Never take credit for that. No way. Because that's not me. That's the Lord. That's the Holy
interesting
Spirit.
How that works out sometimes, isn't it? Right? Or it'll be a misstep with one and then somebody else just magically presents it.
Yes.
We've had that happen so many times at the school.
It's
or
beautiful.
I think of when Louis was hired. There's just been a lot of really neat where you could tell God was involved.
That's right.
It feels like we're regularly offering those prayers up.
Right.
Amen.
Because it's not even just people to bring on staff. It's like the right volunteer.
Absolutely.
Right? The right
Yes.
ministry leader, the right, just you're always looking for someone to be convicted of the thing that of the need that exists.
That's right.
Right.
Yes.
You mentioned benefits. So something I'd love to, and again, we can get in the weeds.
Sure.
But then we could also discuss it a little bit more superficially.
Of course.
But so one of the things that as a layperson working in the church, and you and I have had countless conversations.
Right.
How does that, like, what I find is our benefits and insurance is structured awesome for
single
singles.
people.
Could you shed a little light just from your experience? Is anything being done
Yes.
so that when we're recruiting, we can recruit lay men and women who also want to have not
Families?
just a career, but a family and be able to
Certainly.
support the family?
Right.
I would
Certainly.
love to get your
Yes.
insight on that.
Yes, it is something that we are working on constantly.
Mhm.
And so we're always working with our brokers to understand that while we want to offer the very best package, as we spoke earlier, we're not always the highest payer in the world, right? So we want to offer a very rich benefit package. Our benefits that we offer are the highest tier that Anthem
They
Blue
are,
Cross
yeah.
Blue Shield offers. So
90% copay.
Yes.
Almost all
It's
plans
excellent.
are
It
we
really
offer
is.
the very
yeah.
best. And prior to my arriving, when there was a benefits coordinator, it was solely focused on single people. And, when I got there, I found it to be extremely expensive for family. And unfortunately, those costs continue to rise. And so as we look at meetings with our brokers and understanding how to cap some of those costs and offer creative options to our employees, it's never ending. It's it's a challenging process because when the ACA happened in 2016 under President Obama, we were grandfathered. Our medical insurance plan, and this might be going into the weeds too much, but we were grandfathered. And that grandfather plan meant that whatever was in place at that time was frozen, and you can only make changes a very little bit either way. A little bit better, a little bit worse, but you have to keep what you had at that time. And so since then, we've been looking at different avenues to try to make that insurance more affordable without breaking our grandfathering status. That grandfathering status is so important to us because this is the way that we are able to not offer contraceptives, not be part of the abortions, so on and so forth. So because we're a religious plan, we're very landlocked. They kind of tied our hands in that way. But I don't lose hope. I do not lose hope because I believe that we will find a way to lower those costs for our families and for our single parents and what have you. So
maybe that facet of the law could change someday.
Perhaps it would.
Do you ever see, and you and I might have talked about this before, but I don't recall, like where we would be able to get like the USCCB together to, so when you've got more people, you can bring your costs down, or even the state of Indiana.
Yes.
I mean, no,
Kris
probably right
knows.
now we can't do it because of because of this scenario. But if that ever
I'm sure
did
you could
open
leverage
up,
with a larger group.
would we
Right.
be able to? Do you think that's something that could ever happen if that were to be changed? That ACA ruling.
If that could be changed and we could take several religious plans and put them into one, that would be amazing.
That would be
And
so
I
good.
know that the state of Michigan did that with
did
their
they?
various
Okay.
dioceses in the state of Michigan and
right.
have it down to a fine oiled machine, as I understand it. In the Diocese of Gary, we would have to have the other dioceses in the state of Indiana. And it's something that we've talked about.
Right.
Is it something the bishops would sign up for? I don't know. So
Exactly. But we really can't until that rule
right.
would have to be changed.
So how did Michigan get around that?
it was 15 years ago that they did it.
They did it probably before.
They did it
Was it
before.
prior to the
Yeah,
ACA?
before,
Okay.
right.
Oh, wow. So that was providential
Yes.
for them. Okay.
And Kelly hadn't been here long enough at that point.
Yeah, she's negotiating statewide.
She was
Yeah.
trying to get a handbook for the diocese at
Yeah.
that point, right?
Exactly.
That's very
right.
insightful. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure, absolutely.
That's one of the goals of this type of conversation is to help shed light on some of those questions that I'm sure other people, even within our own diocese,
Sure.
they'd like to know why don't we work on this a little bit better,
Right.
Right.
right?
Right.
And so that seems like you guys have identified the issue.
Yes.
Trying to find creative solutions around it.
Correct. Correct.
We've done that here, as you know, at the parish to try to make it attractive for potential recruits and staff and team members by offering things like tuition assistance or with certain positions, if you're a pastoral associate, housing allowance or parsonage.
I think that's an area where parishes could really be missing the boat on that. I know we've talked about that before too. How many convents do we have that are empty or old rectories that are empty and that could be used to just creatively, say, hey, maybe I could put a couple single people in it, maybe even share with churches. And then as people get married, maybe they are able to take over an old rectory that a priest isn't using anymore. We have schools that aren't in operation anymore that are sitting there. I just think maybe if we could, or not just us in our diocese, but dioceses and parishes everywhere, just to really look at your property of what you have, and maybe that could be repurposed, and you can offer that as a benefit that makes it where that family is living there rent-free because they're a pastoral associate, and then they would be able to be able to better provide for their family and the salary that we're able to offer.
A concrete example of that would be something like, we have 5 parishes in a 5-mile radius, something like that.
Right.
I mean, do we each need to have our own youth ministry coordinator that's trying to, or can we work as teams?
Right.
And have something where maybe one of the rectories that isn't being used, or if there's a convent or something repurposed, you can attract kids out of college, you can attract people that were in focus mission, right? And so just to think outside the box and to be creative to solve some of these problems.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. 2 former focus missionaries that we have that came right out of focus and came to us, but they were able to have that as pastoral associates, that benefit. So,
what tips would you give for recruiting? Because that's something that we're always trying to find new and creative ways to reach people who have a heart for ministry. I mean, I know for myself, I had gone through seminary. And I left seminary knowing that I still wanted to be in ministry. That's where my heart was. But for most, especially kids who are going through college, I don't know how many of them are thinking the church is a career path for me.
Right.
It might be like I might want to do a gap year.
Sure.
I might want to join an organization like Focus, put 3 years in, and then I'll be out. And then I'll find my actual career. But we need talented, young, and maybe not so young. We need talented people who can bring their gifts in service of the mission of the church. So are there any tips or anything you can share to help recruit?
I appreciate that question so much, Khalil, because when I reflect back on my career in the church, prior to working for the Diocese of Gary, I worked for the Franciscan Sisters of Chicago. And they were very much into involving us in their ministry. And that was an attractor because people would see what the sisters did and say, I want to be a part of that. And when I came to the Diocese of Gary, I remember thinking, wait a minute, we get to discriminate based on religion. And at the time, because the sisters were running nursing homes and they were not that focused on hiring just Catholic people. I was shocked, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that's crazy. My whole thought process has changed. I have grown immensely in that way because now I celebrate it. I celebrate the fact that we actually get to attract people who want to be part of that ministry with us. And what a blessing. And it's so cool because when we hire people, and you guys know this, when they're all in, right? They're so excited to be a part of it. And so that taking that concept and throwing it out there with the fishing pole has really been helpful. Taking testimonials from people who come on board and say, wow, we get to go to Mass once a week while we're working. How neat is that? You know what I mean? So I feel like if we really could focus on the non-tangibles, the beauty of being in ministry and what we do, I think that's the key. I really do.
Right.
And it's not, I loved what you said, because we don't go out to discriminate based on religion.
Exactly.
We get to look for people who align with the mission and the culture of the parish or the diocese.
Right.
And that's when we find usually the most fruitful people.
You got it.
And that's where we get the most excited as a team.
Yes.
When we onboard somebody who's like, you know what, they might not know it all because they're new, but they know it in their heart.
That's right.
And it's like, there's fertile soil here, and it's they can take you in a whole, just a boost of energy in a whole new direction while still being aligned with the mission. It's a breath of fresh air when you get somebody like that on team.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah. And practically speaking, I'll try to use different sites. Like, so we always post at the diocese, but then for teachers, there's certain teacher sites that we would use for jobs.
Do you know what some of those are? Just to give people practical tips.
Well, now it goes through the AppleTrack, so it automatically posts it. It's a system that we have through the diocese, but I think it's K through 12 blog spot.
How about we do this?
Yeah.
If you could email those to Mike, we'll put them in the show description.
Right. Okay, great.
So if you're watching this, check the show description out, and then we'll make sure we list all of the resources.
Could do that. And then if it's a position that's very ministerial, and we definitely have to have somebody who's Catholic for that, then there's certain Catholic job sites, catholicjobs.com and jobsforcatholic.com, and some of those sites. Sometimes recruiting at Catholic universities, though I haven't had a lot of luck with that. I want to throw that back to you in a minute. And then just for more general jobs, then we use Indeed a lot, and we tend to get a lot of traffic.
I think we found our relational ministry coordinator who heads up our evangelization and alpha programs. Was it through Indeed?
It was through LinkedIn. That was the first. That was one of those God moments, because we could not find someone, and we tried all these things. And I said, hey, how about if we tried LinkedIn? It's, it is going to cost us because a lot of these platforms are free, which is nice. Yeah. But you said, could I get approval to do that? So Father Sammy said yes. We got one resume through LinkedIn, and it was Louis Kane, who's been one of our, has just really brought our alpha program to, but that's what I mean. That was all God.
That's right.
Why did he put that idea in my head? Why Louis, the only person that applied, I could only think that that was meant to be, so that's really cool. And then really a lot of just personal, like when you see somebody in the parish that you feel like has the skills, they have the personality, they will fit in with the team. Your new assistant, Laura, is a perfect example of that. Like, she and I kind of made the connection. She's like, oh, I'd love to be able to work at the parish. And I'm like, I'm keeping you in mind. And sure, I'll kind of keep those people in the back of my mind. Amy Goggins, another one that came to us in that way. So I feel like I'm always collecting people, kind of like that person could be somebody. But I'm curious, Kelly, we haven't talked about that. Have you had much luck with the colleges? I haven't done on-site recruiting. Maybe that would be a good thing to try. But
we do local on-site, so like Purdue North Central or IUN or what have you, VU. We go to VU as well. Maybe just bringing up the idea that we're an employer. Maybe some people, college kids, don't even realize, oh, wow, the Catholic Church hires people. Yeah. So that's a good way to get people to get it out there.
People
I've not gotten a lot.
More just word, maybe at least getting the image out there. I wonder if we tried, maybe we should go on a road trip and go to Franciscan.
Oh, there we go.
That's right. Do a recruiting event, you and I. That would be fun.
Yes.
HR road trip.
Well, and if someone is watching this who is or maybe knows someone,
send them our way.
Is a counselor or someone in that capacity at a college.
Yeah.
Reach out to these two women here.
Right.
That's right.
Great to have those relationships, just to know what's possible.
Sure. Yeah. We've talked about maybe starting an internship program here. Khalil and I have just very beginning stages of talking about that.
What excites me about that, and I'm glad you raised that because I wanted to bring it up, and I'd love to see maybe that's where parishes can collaborate, or even on a diocesan level, creating internship programs. So we're investing in the people who are coming out of college or wanting to enter into ministry, and let's make sure we align them with parishes who can really pour into them and help them become the men and women that God wants them to be in service of his church. And so we've talked about having a relational ministry track, a media track. Especially in this day and age, so many people enjoy communications and social media and digital media and graphic design and web development and all those. But they don't know that the church is looking for you.
Exactly.
So it's like, hey, let's connect. We've got something going on here. We'd love for you to be a part of it and to show you what it is we've been doing. Or music, for that matter. Music, probably more obvious because you go to Mass every Sunday and you see, they need, but
They may think that those are part-time jobs, and
Yeah.
sometimes they are full-time jobs.
Do you take the
depending on
step to like
size,
show
right?
interest? I'd love to be a part of your music ministry.
Right.
And this is what I can get out of it. I can also, I can invest into the community, be a blessing, right, to others, but then I'm also going to get something out of it in return.
Right.
So really excited by developing these internship tracks.
And we've talked about liturgy, for example, is an area that's, like you said, there's not much training out there outside of like seminary. So if you had somebody who left seminary, but there's not really a lot of places. You could probably speak a little bit more to this, but that's an area that's so specialized.
Well, especially for the type of liturgy that we're trying to put together and the experience that we want for people who come here. It's a little bit more different than your traditional liturgical training, even than what I got in the seminary, which was great, but it's not what we have here, which is more a blend of contemporary and traditional worship styles. If you're interested in seeing what that looks like, you can please visit us. We're not that far outside Chicago, or you can visit sjaplus.org. And we live stream our masses, so you just get a little taste of what it is that we do. But to have somebody who has a heart for that type of worship experience, how do you train them up? How do you build them up? How do you give them the management skills, the ministry leader skills, the ability to discern what does the church want for us to do in this liturgical season? And then how can I operate within that to be creative and to create an experience that opens hearts up so that the Holy Spirit can touch people, right? Because we think with our hearts more than with our heads, and we're trying to create an experience that really allows people to be vulnerable, allows people to recognize that I'm here for the person next to me as well as myself.
Sure.
And so we're looking for liturgical and worship leaders who can do that. The evangelicals do that really well.
They do.
They're really successful at that. I mean, their praise leaders can get up and offer testimony and really draw the congregation in. And it's not just entertainment. We're fooling ourselves if we're thinking that's entertainment.
Sure.
Because they're obviously being fruitful. Like these people are coming back week in, week out. They're giving their lives to Christ. There's an emotional connection. They're inviting other people in. So it's like they're fishing with bait that's obviously effective. How can we do the same? So how can we train up worship leaders that do the same?
Right.
And that's where maybe some of these internship tracks, especially how do we network with colleges to be able to afford their students that type of experience and opportunity is really exciting.
One of the programs that I work with is called Handshake. And so Handshake is an online recruitment tool that puts your jobs in front of as many colleges as you want.
Right. You can select the ones that you want. We've used that too. We haven't had as much success with that one. Have you though? Have you found
I've gotten some calls, but I haven't had any hires.
Right.
But I think just any which way
that you're getting the word out there.
Getting the word out there. We've had 2 really successful internships where we did hire the people.
Oh, cool.
So
how did you find them? Do you know how you?
We did. We found one because the person was working for our Catholic cemeteries, and he came to do an internship with us, and it turned into a position. And then
he decided he liked living or working with the living rather than the dead.
That's right.
I don't know where you were going with that.
And then last summer we had a huge project, a finance project. It was a task that needed to get done, and we put the position or the internship out with Valparaiso University, and one of the students at the student center, St. Teresa of Avila, reached out and said, I'm an accounting major. I think I'd be perfect. We said, come on in, and did a paid internship, and it was a beautiful experience.
Wow. Oh, that's great.
The best part of it to me, too, though, is that we're creating disciples, right? We're doing, so he left us, and he's telling other people, hey, guess what I did? This was really neat this summer as a college student.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? So,
for sure. Definitely.
It's pretty awesome.
Could you speak a little bit to, so one thing that we're trying to work on at SJE is the importance of culture.
Yes.
So like somebody who leaves an experience like that is usually touched by the culture as well as the work, or else they would,
You got it.
It's like, you can't wait to leave.
That's right.
Work was fun, but God, don't go there.
Right,
So,
right.
So we're finding that culture is the bedrock.
Culture is king.
Can you speak to that? Like, how do you
love
get
culture.
how do you identify what kind of culture do you have?
I would say that I personally don't identify it. I feel like Father Kris Stanish and Bishop McClory have done an amazing job of setting the stage for us and letting us become the culture. It's been an amazing experience. So Father Kris has been with us for 1.5 years, and he has dedicated and poured into us what his vision and culture is. This is something that's never happened in my 17 years. Wow. And so to watch the transformation of the people around me has been nothing short of miraculous. It's beautiful because now people have that they have not only the head, but they have the heart. Mm-hmm. The heart's there now. The heart is beating. And it's just, Father Declan has added to it. It's just been amazing to watch the transformation in our building.
Well, shout out to Father Kris for doing
yes!
that. Kudos to him. Could you point to particular things that you found have been helpful to help transform culture?
Most certainly. I would say the dedication to the staff and training and development. He gives us an opportunity to get together at least monthly, have a meal together, have some professional development as well as some spiritual development. I mean, these are the things that culture are built on, right? And so in the beginning, as I look back, it was uncomfortable for many because it was like, whoa, this isn't what we do. This isn't how this is done. This is weird. What are they doing? And in fact, actually had a couple employees leave who said, you know what? This isn't what I signed up for. I'm here for a job. And it was like, okay, that was a self-selection that was good for our culture, So,
and that's so important to recognize that you make these introductions because you're trying to steer the team together in the right direction, and by doing that, sometimes the people that really don't align, they start standing out. For their own good, you want to try to support them and say, hey, this is the direction that we're going. How can we help you go with us? But if not, how can we help find the right spot for you? That isn't necessarily on the team.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean you're any less of a Catholic or devout or engaged in the mission. We just might be the team in the season for you.
Exactly.
So those are so important.
Yes.
And so it's okay for us to recognize that.
Right. And to know that there's hope.
That's
you had transformation where, and you're in the diocese. Khalil and I could speak to, we've had transformation here. I know Father Sammy probably doesn't like when I'm brutally honest, but I mean, our culture was toxic, wasn't it? I mean, when Khalil and I...
Wait, are we talking about the same Father Sammy? What are you talking about?
Well, he's brutally honest, and he probably wouldn't like me to say we had toxic culture.
No, it definitely was. Yeah,
it was. I mean, Khalil and I, when we first, our first, I don't know what, 4 years maybe, it was just really working on it. And kind of like you said, when we started having our spiritual staff days, everybody was like, nobody really wanted to talk or share in the small groups. But then little by little, it got better and better. And I think it started to build trust, and people started to have fun together.
So I'd like to, again, because one of the beautiful things about this is we can get into the weeds on some things.
Right.
So what does it mean when you say toxic culture?
Oh, I don't think people trusted each other.
So lack of trust.
I don't think people enjoyed really being around each other. I didn't like coming into the office. I worked at home at that time because I was so part-time, and I'd be like, oh gosh, I got to go in there today.
Oh my.
And when Kris used to show up, now she's in the office all the time. When Kris used to show up, you do like the side eye, like, uh-oh.
Why is she here? Yeah. Why is HR here? Somebody getting fired? But it really was kind of bad.
Yeah, that's how it felt like.
It felt like that, and we had high turnover because I think at that point too, we didn't have a clear vision. And then as we did we got our clear vision, and Father Sammy really became convicted of be disciples, make disciples, and all of that entailed. Then we had people too that just were not bought into that. They were not bought into Alpha. Some of the things that now today we're very successful at, but they were very resistant to. And people did kind of self-select out some, and then some, things didn't work out. But it was a painful time, I think, for everyone, a painful growth process. But I think now on the other end of it, you could say, wow, it's worth it for what we have now. And not that there's still not little hiccups. I was running behind today because we had a little hiccup, but I don't think they're things that can't be resolved because now there is more of that basis. There's more connections that people have with one another, and
And you're coming to the office, so it's a good thing.
They're not as scared of me. Hopefully they're not as scared of me as they used to be.
We still are, Kris. Why is she in this meeting?
Yeah.
What is she doing here?
For a while, I called myself the Grim Reaper.
We we do get a bad rap in HR. We just do. Like, I always tell Father Kris, I'm so blessed to have the personality I do to deal with that personification of HR.
I don't know. Usually whenever we have to do like diocesan or like cross parish networking, I like to sit at the HR tables because those are the ones that are usually the most fun.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. You guys are just in it so much. So the toxic thing, just in hearing both of your experiences in that, to point out, so a couple things and add my experience. One, it's not necessarily a reflection on the people themselves.
Right.
Like, I could honestly say we've had, maybe with the exception of a few, we've had awesome people on team throughout my tenure here, and I think I'm going on 10 years myself.
Nice.
We've had awesome people. It's just our parish coach says, Ron Huntley, you have to have the right people in the right seats on the bus
At the right
right time. That's really important. And sometimes that person isn't the right person for the responsibility they've been entrusted with and the time that they are there. And that's okay to identify. But when you have that person there that maybe has been there for 10, 15, 20 years and they've always done it a certain way and you're afraid to let them go and you're going to deal with the fallout, well, you got to step back and say, maybe they've served their season and their purpose and for their sake, because if you're not enjoying them being on team, they're probably not enjoying it too. So for their sake, how can I help them either adapt and align and grow, or how do I help them recognize that, hey, I've served to the best that I can in this place, and it's time for me to take my next steps.
Right.
And to help them transition out and to celebrate everything they've accomplished. So it's like,
to your point. No, you make me think of some various people that we have, and our parish tends to be very fast-paced, always got probably too much going on. And we've had some people that were wonderful people and would probably be great in a different parish culture, but it was too much, too hard to keep up with. Or conversely, you may have a parish that is a little bit more laid back and you've got somebody super driven and high paid. They're probably not going to fit well either there. Neither is necessarily right or wrong. It's just that parish has its own culture, personality, and some people are going to be more adaptable to it or more, enjoying that type of a culture, and others won't on either end of the spectrum.
That's right. Yeah. And to your point, Khalil, those folks that are trying so hard, but it's just not the fit that the parish needs at the time. Oftentimes, showing them or illustrating to them, listen, you're not enjoying yourself. You're not what you were. Your joy is not. This isn't life giving to you. Like, sometimes I have found having that conversation is a relief to people.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I thought it was just me, But then when they
we try to, because what we know is, and I'm sure you know from your experience, a lot of people are conflict averse.
Exactly.
But healthy conflict is so important if you want to develop healthy culture.
That's right.
And if you want your mission to actually move forward as a team effort, right? And so having those conversations are actually a breath of fresh air because it shows the person that they actually know me. Right. That they're seeing me.
And they care about me.
And they care about me.
Right.
And so that's so important, not to avoid what we think is going to be a difficult conversation, but with boldness to enter into them, because I love you and I want your time to be here to be a positive one.
Exactly.
I want you to draw closer to Jesus while you're here. And so if I'm not seeing that, let's talk about that.
You got it. Absolutely. Agree with that wholeheartedly. I've had to have those conversations. They, while could be seen as uncomfortable, in the long run, always tend to bear fruit.
Amen. And maybe if you're a pastor, or maybe you're in charge of a team on staff and you're not good at having those types of conversations, that's where I often will call Kris into a meeting.
That's where we come in.
Yeah, exactly. Like, invite someone else in on team.
You've got it.
Who can not just mediate,
right,
but then who can also be that voice of charity and helping accompany someone along.
Trying to see both sides of the story or both sides of an issue. Because usually, as we all know, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Like, everybody each has their own perspective, but it's probably, if we could meet in the middle. That's the key.
Sure.
Are there any tips or pitfalls you would want to help bring to pastors' attention when they're leading teams and when they're trying to shape culture? I know that's a big, broad question.
Yeah, that's a big, broad question.
And that what we can do is have that be like a topic for another conversation. But is there something that comes to mind?
Yes.
Like, Father, you're hearing us talk about culture. here's one thing we'd like to bring to your attention. You mentioned like Father Kris was doing the spiritual and the professional development. Maybe is there a tip you would like to offer?
I think the clear vision. I think a lot of parishes probably maybe don't have a clear vision. Like I feel like any one of us could say, what's our vision? What's our mission? It's to be disciples, make disciples. And, Father's very clear about our steps and our methods that we're going to take to do that. And I think that helps everybody to kind of be aligned on the same page. And when we have a situation where someone isn't, then okay, instead of just going, oh, they don't fit now. No, we need to, you made the comment today, pour into people to help them to understand that vision, because it may just be an answer, not hearing things the same way somebody else is. So we just have to keep repeating that message over and over again to our parishioners, to our staff. And that is key too, to the parishioners as well, because if the staff knows the vision, but the parish doesn't, there's a disconnect there too. So Father Sammy and Father Declan speak to both constantly, with that vision. And I think that helps us to just kind of take off in a lot of the things that we want to do.
Nice. I'm looking at it perhaps more diocesan-wide, and my advice to pastors is, it is not all on your shoulders.
Oh, that's a good one, too.
It is not. And there are resources and there are people, and we're all here to help you, your parishioners, they're your family. Like, tap into them, as you spoke earlier, for volunteerism, to get assistance. Know that there are other parishes who have best practices. You see something you like at another parish, don't hesitate to be vulnerable and say, how are you doing this? How is this happening? It's growing so much. So I guess it's not all on your shoulders, and be willing to be vulnerable, to learn more and to do more. And to just,
that's a great point. I would love to see that in our diocese and other dioceses, parishes working together more. I know if I've gone to an HR conference or something, isn't that the best part of the whole thing? Is if you can have like just a table where you're talking to other people and this is what we're doing.
That's right.
And that you learn so much more than any of the speakers that are there, just learning from other HR people. And I feel like priests and parishes could do that with each other. But there's got to be that openness to do that and not feel like it's, oh gosh, that means he's better than me if I'm asking him for advice. Like, get rid of
all in this
mindset.
together.
Yeah, we all want to help each other.
I love both those answers genuinely, because I'm thinking just my experience, not just being on team here, but being a father, being a man, you want to have the answers for your family.
That's right.
Like, your family's looking at you to have the answers.
Sure.
And I humbly submit this to anyone that does listen, especially our priests. We know that you don't have all the answers, but we love you and we're going to look to you anyway. And we're here to help you if you can let us be a part of that process, right? It's always an invitation. I never want to force myself onto Father or because it's not my place.
That's right.
But if Father, and that's an act of humility, it's like recognizing that, okay, I might be weak in this area. And for some priests, that could be, I don't know how to set a vision. Or how do I communicate that vision?
Exactly.
Can I get help in vision casting? That's a real thing.
Sure.
Like, if you're thinking culture's direction I want my team to go in, well, without a heading, you're not going to go anywhere. That's the vision is your heading.
Right.
And your responsibility is just to constantly call that heading out and to make sure people are working together to move in that direction. Because as you grow, if you're effective in that, you're going to grow. There's going to be more people involved. And then that's more of a reason for you to be able to double down and share what that vision is.
Exactly.
So find somebody who can help craft a vision, shore up your communication, and then you're not doing it by yourself. There's other priests that you can tap into. There's diocesan resources you can tap into. Your own parishioners you can tap into.
That's right.
And I think until you work at a parish, you don't really understand all that the pastor has to do, the priest has to do.
Oh, it's so true.
Because not only do they have to manage, in some cases.
You mean they don't just sit around all day?
Right. Just
pray the rosary and
celebrate Mass on Sunday.
Yeah,
they're done.
They do have their spiritual life that they've got to be attuned to.
Yeah.
They are running, in a lot of cases, $1 million business, more or less, depending on your parish.
They're managing facilities. They're having to deal with people. They've got some
management.
schools.
And then at the same time, they have to be pastoral because people are coming to them with horrible situations in their lives. And so they're trying to be a businessman and be a priest and be, all these different hats that are really difficult. And I think people don't really realize
they do not
the enormity of that role.
I agree wholeheartedly.
They think maybe it's saying mass and doing confessions and maybe having a meeting or two. And
running to a hospital now and again or
right,
something.
doing an anointing. And it's so much more than that. There's so much more responsibility. And seminary prepares them very well for that theological part, but it not probably as much on the business end. And they truly are running a business,
They are.
you know. And some are running very big businesses, depending on the size of their parish. So
That's so true. I'm glad you threw that in,
yeah.
Kelly, because Kris, you painted a great picture of like, Father he's wearing so many hats that we don't even understand or see for ourselves. Because when do we see Father? Your average person, you see him on Sunday before or after Mass,
That's
or
right.
I've got an issue, I'm going to call him up, or he's going to baptize my kid. But his day is full of all these administrative and managerial responsibilities. But in the middle of that, just like today, Father Miletta called to the hospital.
Sure.
Right.
So it's like the
Yes.
the
And then
roles
that
and the
will
hats
mess
they
up.
wear.
This is an impending death that will likely occur with the
Yeah.
funeral. And then,
Right.
so now people that maybe were scheduled with him now will have to be moved. And it's hard to have empathy. You want to see him for your needs, but then not realizing.
That's where
ton of
tapping
other
into your
people,
people is
yeah.
so important.
Yes.
Right.
Like you look at how, and I had to come around to this myself because it's almost like you're afraid to ask of people too much, or you say no for them when
That's a great point.
right.
It
You
is.
don't want to.
You say no for them before you even ask. You just say
I'm
no.
just
for
thinking
them.
of the people in our community,
Yes.
and we're just one community amidst thousands. It's like they're all, they're all accomplished in their personal lives. They're doing awesome things, whether professionally or in their families or in their. I'm thinking every time Dima and I talk about we're expecting a kid. So
Exciting. Congratulations.
I look at some of these moms that are like, and my wife, they're juggling 3, 4, 5, 6 kids, and they're pulling up in vans, and they're showing up to 8:00 Mass, and it's like, how can we learn from you? Right? So that's just on our level.
Right.
But even like, so for a pastor who's having to wear all those hats, like recognize that your people can get stuff done.
Right.
If you just trust them, and
right.
if you find out who can do what for you, and don't say no for them, invite them into the mission, speak your vision into them, and you're just going to go so much further.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And I don't know if you want to bring up our leadership summits that we're working on. So 3 times a year, we have our parish leaders come in, and then that's an opportunity. Father will usually give some sort of a vision talk, just kind of, even if it's a little repetitive, but he's recasting, refocusing people. And then we try to do some leadership skills training as well with them. So we've used, I think we mentioned this at the Discipleship Conference, but the APEST and Gallup a lot, just to help to get to know your staff better and what their strengths and weaknesses are that you can kind of, and how people are different and who you could tap for something that maybe you're not as good in. This time around, we're hoping to do conflict resolution at our leadership summit in February. So
Excellent.
yeah, so we think that will be helpful.
If anyone, if you're listening to this and if you're around the St. John the Evangelist area, you're welcome to join us for those leadership summits.
Right. Our next one is February 24th from 9 to noon over here at the Day Chapel.
Yeah.
So
Anyone's welcome. If you want to bring your leadership team or if you want to just come check it out, we'd be happy and honored to host you.
Great.
Thanks for coming, Kelly.
Thank you, Khalil.
Yeah, thanks for
inviting
coming
me.
on. And
That's
Kris,
it.
thanks for coming back
She
on.
thought she'd have even more. She's like, it's over? I enjoyed it so
But wait, there's more. We're going to have you back.
We're good.
Yeah.
Kelly was a little nervous, but she
That wasn't
did
bad, right?
great.
Wasn't bad? Good.
would
Yeah.
not
I
have
was talking with you.
You would not have imagined you did not look nervous at all. You were a pro. I knew she'd be
I
a
don't know
pro.
about that.
Girl
but-
boss.
Isn't that the plaque on your desk?
Mary Ann. Girl boss. Yeah, she's the girl boss. Yeah.
Thanks to both of you for
funny.
coming on
Thank
and
you,
sharing your
Khalil.
experience. Yeah, praise God.
Amen.
Yeah, so if you found this conversation helpful, please share it with people you know, especially people who are in ministry. If you know someone who's in HR and they can get some benefit from this, or anything we can do to help advance not just the mission of the church, but to draw people closer to Jesus is really the goal behind DiscipleSHIFT. So thanks for tuning in. Take care and God bless.